you needed a certain full stack engineer with Node and React to work out of your office, you might see 5 or 10 resumes. You don't need any AI for that. You don't need any sophisticated automatic vetting for that. Now, suppose you're thrown in the situation where you're willing to say, well, I'll hire the best person in the world wherever they are. Now you have 5,000 people. What are you going to do with that? How do you
What
figure
are
out?
you going to do with that? Vijay Krishnan, thank you for joining me on 20 Minute Leaders. I'm so honored to have you here. Are you in Palo Alto now?
I am Michael. Yes. Thanks for inviting me.
What? Wonderful. No. Thank you for being here. Your journey is so fascinating, and there's so much to talk about. I want to talk about your experience in IIT and at Stanford. I want to talk about being at Yahoo, then Rover, selling your company Rover, and then now being the CTO of Turing, which is doing, I think, phenomenal things that are so relevant for this upcoming decade as we're seeing a surge of remote software developers, whether it's hiring, onboarding, and really trying to understand how do we get to the top 1%. So I've talked already way too much. Vijay, tell me a little bit about yourself, all the way back from Bombay. How do you go through your journey?
Sure. So I got started in the field of AI and machine learning rather early. I think I have been at it for something like 18 years now.
Wow.
A lot longer than certainly from it wasn't as cool or as hot at that specific point. But yeah, I started working on such problems all the way back from my days at IIT Bombay, then at Stanford University, and then even as a scientist at Yahoo, where I mostly focused on research publications, patents, things of that sort. It was in my previous startup that I first applied a lot of these methods to commercial problems. Like my previous company, Rover, did personalized content recommendations. And in other words, we would figure out what topics you like based on the kind of content you consume and recommend other content you may like. That company got acquired about 4 years back. And in the course of running my past startup, we had accidentally stumbled into a lot of these insights that would eventually set the stage for us starting a company like Turing, since we had worked with some really exceptional software engineers from different parts of the world. Like when we found it challenging to scale our Silicon Valley team with the same high standards that we always maintained, we looked to
Right.
other countries. So we ended up working with a distributor team of engineers in Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Serbia, China, and so on. We somehow managed to
Wow.
get that team to work, and doing a lot of things by trial and error, figuring out how to effectively source and screen and ultimately gain a lot of ongoing benefits by working with the very best engineers around the world. Gave us a lot of valuable insights. So when it was time to start a new company, often you want to check off a bunch of boxes. First of all, is the market really large? Is the problem really valuable? But there are also some a last point, which is to do with, are you uniquely the founders who are suitable for starting such a company? Do you have certain insights and
Right.
understanding which far surpass most other smart people you know? And the Turing idea checked off the last point also, in addition to all the other ones, and making this the right company for us to start.
Vijay, we could go on for hours now, so I'm really gonna have to restrain myself over here. First, take me back 18 years.
Hmm.
I didn't hear machine learning and AI 18 years ago. In fact, I didn't hear much of it even 12 years ago. How do you're in Bombay? First of all, it's incredible that you went to IIT. I believe the acceptance rate is something just above 3%. We're gonna skip over that right now. But tell me a little bit about your growing up, your upbringing, and why AI 18 years ago.
Yeah. The acceptance rate, I think, is lower than 1%. But yes, speaking
Oh,
of
okay.
yeah, and it's anyway. Well, at that point, the thing is, I think I was very, I suppose, interested in probability and statistics and a lot of things around mathematical modeling and so on. What I liked about machine learning is that it also had a lot of nice commercial applications. Like there was I remember having this conversation with my dad, where back in my undergraduate days, where I was telling him, "Well, I really like this mathematical stuff, and I'm thinking of going into, graph algorithms and some purely theoretical stuff." My dad was like, "No, you probably won't get a job if you if you go down that area. Think of something more practical." And machine
I
learning.
love that.
And machine learning sort of I like the fact that it had the mathematical depth. It satisfied those sort of intellectual this thing curiosities and other things I had, while also at that point, of course, it had nowhere the practical applications that it had now. But I love the fact that it could solve a lot of problems that could not be solved by any other means. A lot of things to do with the text classification, email classification into spam or not spam, topical text classification. All these were very much possible a good 20 years back, and other problems to do with NLP and so on. Though some at that point, a vast majority of the most important NLP problems weren't easily solvable, but a subset of them were. And I generally like the fact that there was this nice combination of both theoretical depth as well as practical application, even at that point.
Right. So before we dive into Turing and what you're doing over there, I want to talk a little bit about building great teams. And I think part of the journey that you're talking about here and part of the insights that you've gained into Turing is that, there are different ways to building a great team. The way that we build great teams in 2021 is very different than how we build teams in 2010. And you've harnessed that insight through having that distributed team. And we have companies like GitLab, I believe, that are fully distributed right from the get-go. So the world is changing. But before all that, you're starting a startup. You think you have an idea that is worth pursuing. As the CTO, as the Chief Technology Officer, what is your responsibility in scaling the team and getting the right software engineers on board? What are some of the biggest challenges or excitements around that?
Are you asking specifically in the context, my challenges in the context of Turing, or CTOs in general, in the context of other
Well, I'd
startups?
love to hear from your journey. What are some things that perhaps other young CTOs should keep in mind as they go and they scale the team? Because obviously it's one thing to take your 2-3 best friends from Stanford and build something, right? But then you want to get to 10, 20, 100 engineers. So how do you do that?
Right. No, it's a great question. I think we have certainly had to think through a lot of things from first principles in the context of a startup. Like, for example, if all you're doing, obviously, you don't need to invent each and everything from first principles. In a company, there are a lot of the things you can simply borrow by way of best practices. But there are a lot of important things, and hiring is certainly one of them, where it is very, very important that you have your own thesis. You think long and hard regarding what is suitable for your company, and not just for engineers. I would even say this is for true of various other roles, particularly where a certain amount of technical depth is necessary. For example, at Turing, we do a lot of things very unconventionally. For example, our growth marketing efforts and many of those other things report to me. They don't report to a traditional CMO. And in large measure,
Really?
yes, this is again because of our obsession with the data science part of these things as a way to drive results. So we have a lot of there are enough areas where we disagree with the world at large. And you might have even heard of Facebook, for example, recently taking the position that I believe it was their VP of marketing or their CMO or somebody who came from the classic growth marketing track that was more the data science kind of track rather than the PR kind of track. So yeah, generally, ultimately, I mean, you accomplish great things in a company by in large part hiring the best people. Now, this cannot just be achieved by looking at, well, what company is doing something similar today. Let's just hire people out of those and do the exact same thing they are doing. That is not going to get you a 10x better result. Like, one thing people often say in the context of a company is you better be 10x better than the competition to blaze through the market. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time selling. And so uh, this is certainly something we've given a lot of thought, and I encourage everyone to do this.
I'm still inspired by that single sentence. That we're obsessed with using data to make everything that to reach all your matrix, right? And I think that obsession, and obviously coming from your background, I can understand how you truly understand the value of what you're doing, and I think that in a world where a lot of these words are getting thrown out quite extensively, actually being intentional on being obsessed with the data to have that growth, and I love the fact that your growth marketing reports to the CTO and not to the marketing division, because it is at the end it's all about using the data. So talk to me a little bit about this idea of vetting for greatness. Right, that is one of the headlines on your website. Vetting for greatness for remote software developers. First of all, what is the problem? Why do we even need to have another vetting system today?
Yeah, I think the main issue is that today, for most part, the whole hiring process itself is quite manual. There are a few tools which do a narrow set of things like administer a programming test or something like that, but we all know that that is a small um, a portion of what a software developer needs to be good at to ultimately be effective in a role. So so I think there's a couple of different things here. I think remote particularly makes it a lot more important that we get this right, because with remote there is there's an opportunity, but that opportunity creates some new challenges along the way. The opportunity is that once you remove the zip code constraint, your theoretical pool of candidates is quite enormous. So for example, suppose you needed a certain full stack engineer with Node and React to work out of your office. You might see 5 or 10 resumes. You don't need any AI for that. You don't need any sophisticated automatic vetting for that. Now, suppose you're thrown in the situation where you're willing to say, well, I'll hire the best person in the world wherever they are. Now you have 5,000 people. What are you going to do with that? How do you?
What are you going to do with that?
Yeah, and I think that is where a lot of things around automation become really valuable to leverage the fact that you suddenly have this giant pool of software developers. Many of them live in countries and in cities where you can't make any sense of their resume, in the sense you today we all of us use proxies. I would say this person went to Stanford, this person worked at Google, this person worked at this other startup that I know has high hiring standards. People use all sorts of shortcuts for quality to engage in some form of shortlisting. Such things don't work very well when you're tapping into talent from all over the world. And so at that point, one has to have a good automated vetting process. Like at Turing, we not only vet for programming skill that a few other platforms do. We also do computer science fundamentals. We do various tech stacks. So how strong are you in specific technologies like Node and React or in GraphQL? How good are you as a communicator? Now, this is in terms of raw English fluency, and also in terms of, I guess, how easy is it to have a good technical discussion with you, where you understand the gist of where something is going and what this other person wants. And very closely related to some of these are matters to do with what is this person's product and business sense like. Obviously, the higher that is, the more autonomously a software developer would be able to operate. So we test for a lot of such things to create a deep developer profile, far in excess of what one could possibly glean from a resume, and use that to make much better matches.
So walk me through the customer journey here. So if I'm hiring for software engineers, I need a data scientist, a front end engineer, and I need a DBA. And now I'm opening myself up to the world, because it's 2021. It doesn't really matter where I'm at in the world. I want the best people, and oftentimes people that are farther away might even be cheaper than the ones that are closer to me. So then, how does it actually work? What is the journey here?
Well, when somebody comes to Turing, the journey for them is fairly straightforward. They simply sign up for Turing. Turing has already done all the work, and from the customer's perspective, the customer gets to review a few developer profiles, can tell us if they would like to do video calls with any of them. If they do like one or more of them, they can start working with them. And we anyway offer this 2-week no risk trial, where if a customer starts working with a developer and decides to stop for any reason in under 2 weeks, they pay nothing. So a lot of this,
Really?
yeah. yes, in many ways, that's just a reflection of our confidence in our match
Of
quality.
course.
Yeah. So there are certainly occasions where where we mismatch, but those are a very small percentage. Uh,
Right.
so that is the thing. Now, if you had to do the whole thing from scratch, well, I mean, you could, you could scrounge around. I mean, people, obviously, recruiting existed before Turing. Other people will attempt to do their own in-house recruiting. But the point is, uh, there are certainly if I mean in the most extreme case, one would have to do everything we do at Turing with regard to generating a giant giant pipeline, doing a whole bunch of other things to make this happen. It I
And
mean
you
if
already have more than 200,000 developers that are registered. So
correct.
as a company, obviously coming to you, I'm already seeing this. You already have a data moat of this incredible pool of developers and your ability to then match me. So I love first of all, I love the fact that you have, first of all, the two-sided marketplace, that you've already solved one side of it. You have them. And now the more I give of myself, the more you get to know me, the better you'll match me with those 200,000. And it's as if I'm getting 200,000 resumes and you're telling me, okay, Michael, and here are the top ones for you. Now tell me a little bit about this, about the culture, because culture has been a significant part of Silicon Valley's journey. I think in the last 3-4 years, every other article on entrepreneur.com and Forbes talks about the culture, whether it's good, usually bad. How do you think this remote work, and inevitably we're moving to 99% of the workforce will be remote, I think, within 10-15 years. What is the impact this is going to have on culture, especially as a chief technology officer amongst developers, which are innately not the most culture extravagant personalities?
So yeah, I think the question you ask is a very, very good one. So there is definitely a sense in which I think in a remote first world, there is definitely a sense in which developers will need to be more I mean will need to sort of be more extrovert ish compared to what they might have been able to get away with. I mean, even in even in an in-office environment, we all know this. Ultimately, from the standpoint of growing, from the standpoint of doing more collaborations, getting promoted, and all those other things, it does become quite challenging if a developer is not sufficiently extroverted. I mean, ultimately, developers, much like everybody else, do wish to grow as individuals, and assume more responsibility, and do more valuable things and everything. So I think in remote, certainly that is one of the things we both test for among our developers, and
Right.
that is certainly something we take into account when deciding if they should be hired and matched to a job. And that is also something that we nudge developers very strongly toward. For example, today we have a collaboration product that Turing developers use, which basically constantly nudges developers in the direction of over communication. So our product ensures that developers do these virtual daily stand-ups, do something like short weekly plans, which all get emailed to a manager, that a manager can sort of so it's quite lightweight to use for a manager, and the manager can sort of intervene and call for a meeting or something if they sort of disagree with some of the plans on the roadmap. The primary objective of this is
I
to
love
ensure
that.
that the developer doesn't go off on their own tangent for a couple of weeks, and then the manager is like, well,
Right.
this was not what I had in mind, or this was not worthy of this time investment, or something like that. Yeah, but there is no question that
I love that.
over communication is vital in this setting. I mean, in
Right.
all sorts of things. In fact, I think this is something we are still discovering. We are still discovering how to do happy hours, how to do parties, and all that. Like I know Zoom supposedly has breakout rooms. This is still something the I'm trying to figure out how to do within Turing, the sort of thing where you invite 50 people to a virtual party, but then also have these groups, right, where groups of 4 or 5 can chat. Then you move on, the same thing that you would do in a real party.
Well, if you had to ask me for a prediction, I think that we're not gonna get that. We're not gonna. What we're seeing now is a huge opportunity and gap in the market where we have this incredibly accelerated pool of software engineers and really the remote workforce in general, moving remotely. That's done. Some will come back to the offices. They'll slowly transition out, understanding that talent can be found everywhere. So definitely in our industry, we're going to be seeing a lot more than we also see today. But I think that there's still a huge gap on the experience and the culture. And I think that are actually the virtual reality and augmented reality, which haven't found a marketplace until today. We've been seeing growing technology, but they haven't really found a place because we didn't need it because we were still in person. I think now there is going to be an interesting opportunity. Vijay, I have so much that I wanted to talk to you about. I'm already upset that our 20 minutes is up. So first of all, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. I know how busy you are. I think what you're doing is incredible. I think it's innovative. It's right on time, and that's definitely where the future is. And I'm personally inspired by your own passion for solving meaningful problems through data. I really that's the way that I see things, and I just loved hearing you talk about that. Before we leave, I have to ask you the most important question. 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
First principle thinker.
First principle thinker. Vijay, thank you so much, and stay safe and stay healthy.